Newsmakers, Congressman Steve Scalise, Republican from Louisiana. He's also the chair of the Republican Study Committee. Thanks very much for being with us.
Good to be with y'all.
And joining us with the questioning is Burgess Everett, who covers Congress for Politico, and Susan Ferricchio, chief congressional correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Congressman, I want to talk about your jobs plan that was unveiled this past week, but on the larger issue of how you view the Republican leadership, Speaker Boehner and Republican leader Cantor, on the agenda that they have thus far put forth for you to run on in 2014, what kind of a grade would you give the GOP leadership?
Well, I think if you look at what the House has done and, through our leadership, I would give them an A because we've actually started bringing bills to the floor to address the problems that are holding our economy back. The problem is you've got the president and Harry Reid in the Senate, who you've got to give an F at best, frankly, because you can't really tell what their plan is. They won't even bring any of these bills that have passed the House to the Senate floor for a vote. The president seems to be MIA when it comes to a jobs plan. I mean, look, we know the president's Final Four brackets. He's never missed a deadline to submit his Final Four brackets, yet we don't know what the president's jobs plan is. So I think the fact that you see the RSC coming forward with a comprehensive bill to address the problems that economy back and frankly to rebuild an America that works again. That's what the American people want us to focus on, and I think you've seen some really good bills move through the House, and our leadership has brought a number of these bills to the floor. We want to continue to sharpen that focus and also put pressure on the president and the Senate to finally start addressing the problems that are holding our economy back. And there are really good ideas that are bipartisan ideas, many of which are in our jobs bill that can get that economy moving again. We just wish that the president and the Senate would join us to start solving these problems.
But doesn't the finger pointing and what some call the bickering go both ways?
Well, again, what is the president's plan? We've laid out a number of objectives through individual bills, again, over 30 bills that have passed the House. But here the Republican Study Committee put our best ideas together in the form of a single bill and addressing problems that frankly, families across the country want us to focus on, how to become energy independent. So many millions of jobs can be created by just opening up some of the resources that the president has closed off on energy production, getting some of these radical regulations that are killing jobs, and saying, things like the REINS Act that we now have in our bill that says if there's a major change in regulation that's going to come forward by an unelected bureaucrat in Washington that will have a devastating impact on our economy, that should first have to go through Congress. And our elected representatives, the representatives of the people of this country, ought to have to pass that if it's sound policy. It shouldn't be able to be the discretion of some unelected bureaucrat to go and impose a new rule that's going to kill jobs in America. And yet that's what's happening right now with agencies like the EPA and the NLRB and so many other federal agencies, including the IRS, that are killing jobs in America.
Let me turn to Susan Ferricchio of the Washington Examiner.
Hi, Congressman.
Hey, Susan.
Hi. Just following up on that, you have said in a recent interview that you think the House leadership has been fairly strong in showing what they're against, but has a weakness for demonstrating what the party is for. Given that this agenda that you guys put forward yesterday includes a lot of the ideas that the Republican Party has already put forward, how does that change things? It's a fairly large bill. Republicans are often opposed to passing big legislation. They like to pass things in small parts. How will this help show what Republicans are for more than what the party has already put forward in the House in smaller legislation?
Well, I think what you're seeing here with this RSC jobs bill is an approach that says let's take those best ideas. And look, there cannot be enough jobs bills that we pass out of the House. But frankly, when I talk to constituents back home, when a lot of my colleagues go around the country and talk to their constituents at town hall meetings and other events, people really don't know what our plan is. And so, even though we've passed a lot of really good bills out of the House, a lot of people haven't seen that focused agenda, and so what we wanted to do is just put those ideas into a single package and say this is our jobs plan to sharpen that focus. And frankly, I think it continues to raise awareness, and it complements and adds to the things that the House has already done in terms of passing good bills to address problems. In our bill, we approved the Keystone Pipeline. Obviously, our leadership's brought a bill to the floor already to approve the Keystone Pipeline. It had a very strong bipartisan vote, very strong appeal across the country. But again, when people are asking us what is our plan to create jobs, I think the fact that we've passed a lot of good bills is important, but when we put those into a single plan, it sharpens that focus even more so that people can see those things that we stand for and contrast them against this failed agenda that President Obama has continued to double down on that are killing jobs in America.
So what you'll need is for the GOP leadership to endorse your plan and bring it to the floor for a vote. The House Speaker said yesterday that he would give no commitment to do that. Have you heard from him about it, and do you have any faith that that will happen?
You know, now that we filed the bill, we already, it's not even been, just a couple of days since the bill has been filed. We have over 30 members of Congress that have co-sponsored this bill. A number of groups across the country that have endorsed our bill now. So I think people are really hungry for those kind of bold ideas. And again, we can't pass enough bold ideas to get this economy back on track. And I think the fact that we continue to fight for the American people, continue to fight to get our economy back on track, that's why people sent us here. That's why we're in the majority in the House. And frankly, if the Senate's not going to address these problems, I think that's going to be one of the big issues in the Senate races, just like in Louisiana, where we're going to have a very contested race. Senator Landrieu is going to have to ask that question: why does she support a leadership that refuses to bring good jobs bills to the floor? If she's for the Keystone Pipeline, why not force a vote in the Senate on approving the Keystone Pipeline? But all of these bills that we've combined into this jobs package have been ideas that have been brought forward by our members, and we need to continue to sharpen that focus to show people what we stand for. While the president's failed agenda is playing out before our very eyes, horrible unemployment numbers. You're seeing so many millions of people just giving up on looking for work because the economy is so bad. And so people are hungry for those bold ideas. And again, the more we can bring to the table, more bills we can bring to the House floor, I think is even better to show that we're fighting for the American people to get our economy moving again.
Congressman, let's talk a little bit about your party's feeling better about taking the Senate this year. I mean, how does House leadership's responsibility change if you have all of Congress under Republican control? Do you have to shift tactics so that you can get things that the president will sign, or do you keep going through with the strategy that you've put forward with this JOBS Act, for example?
Well, I think the House strategy continues to move forward in focusing on solutions to problems that America's facing. The difference would be if we were fortunate enough that the American people said we want to shift Senate majority and have a Republican-run Senate, where we can finally take some of those bills to not just address problems with getting the economy back on track, but look at our health care problems. I mean, the president is a dismal failure. The president, seems like every week he delays another portion of his own law because it's not working, yet they refuse to work in a bipartisan way to solve this problem. And so we have really good ideas. The Senate doesn't want to take them up right now. And so the president's been shielded from even addressing so many of these problems because Harry Reid doesn't bring bills up for a vote to put on the president's desk. So at least a lot of the things you've seen pass the House, including our budget, by the way, we're going to have a budget again that finally gets to balance within the 10-year window. We've passed budgets the last 3 years to do that. The Senate has never passed a budget that will actually get to balance under Harry Reid. So hopefully you've got a willing partner in a Republican-run Senate where we can finally start bringing these bills to the Senate floor for a vote to solve America's problems, to get our country moving again, and then send those bills to the president where he's going to finally have to start making some of those tough decisions. He can't just sit in his room watching NCAA Final Four games and doing all these other things he's doing that are ignoring the problems. He's going to finally have to start confronting real serious problems facing Americans.
So do you envision a Republican-controlled Congress would put pressure on him to either veto legislation or take a strong position on things that you've been sending him that the Senate hasn't been taking up?
Absolutely, and and it puts more pressure on the president to finally start doing his job in working with Republicans and Democrats. I mean, look, a lot of people focus on all the divides between the president and Republicans. Frankly, the president doesn't have many relationships built with a lot of Democrats in the House. When you talk to our colleagues, they don't seem to have much of a relationship with a lot of our rank and file members on the Democratic side. So the president, I don't think, has done a good job at all of trying to build any kind of relationships with Congress to get things done. And it's one of the reasons why so many of America's problems are being unanswered. And people are hungry for solutions to these problems. We've got a lot of really good ideas in the House. Many of them go into the graveyard in the Senate. I do think that changes next year if you have a Republican Senate. But it finally pressure on the president to get engaged in these problems, to work across the aisle as he promised. He's yet to fulfill that promise, but we want to give him that opportunity.
One aspect of the Affordable Care Act and one area that you would change in the law that you think Democrats would work with you on?
There are so many parts. Obviously, I want to repeal this law and go back, and in fact, the RSC has a bill with over 130 co-sponsors to replace the president's health care law with real reforms that will put patients back in charge and lower costs. But just look at this 30-hour work week rule. The president has perverse incentives in his own health care law that are forcing employers to drop their workforce below 50 employees and to put people that are currently full-time workers into part-time status. The law encourages businesses to move employees that are working 40 hours a week to now working below 30. That's a 25% pay cut for American families that the president, through his laws, is incentivizing. If we had a bill that went through the Senate, I guarantee you'd have a very strong bipartisan vote to change that, to stop these incentives that are killing jobs in America through the president's health care law.
Susan Faricio.
Well, by next year, I think if there is a Republican Senate and a Republican House, the pressure will also be on your party to come to agreement on things that it hasn't really had to come to agreement on fully. And I wonder, just as head of the RSC, the Republican Study Committee, you talked about changing the organization a little bit to make it more amenable to working with the leadership and make it more membership driven. Part of that is because there are folks within the RSC who have not been willing to work with leadership, and there has been disagreement within the party, thus leading to our big fiscal cliff standoff and the government shutdown. Do you think the party in the House is really ready to work under a Republican House and a Republican Senate? There still are divisions. And tell me, in your role as RSC chairman, how you have worked to smooth that over.
Sure. And, you know, one of the real biggest divisions that I've seen more in it's not in strategy on policy. I think our philosophies are very similar. It's the tactics of how we get some of these problems that our country's facing to finally start getting addressed. And so when I became chairman of RSC, I wanted to say, look, we've got 175 members. We are a very large portion, about 3/4 of the House majority, and we want to solve problems. Our members have some of the best ideas, some of the smartest members on all the committees in Congress that want to solve these problems. We just want to move that policy forward. We want to get good conservative policy brought to the floor, and in fact, some of that's actually gotten signed into law. The fact that we finally forced the Senate to even bring up a budget. And the fact that we got the House to have a budget that balances in 10 years. We worked in RSC, we worked very closely with Paul Ryan, the budget chairman, who's an RSC member, on that budget last year to get that budget to balance in 10 years, to show the American people that we're willing to actually live within our means to make the tough decisions that they're making in their own kitchen tables every day. And then to contrast it, the president's budget never ever gets to balance, and oh, by the way, adds another $1 trillion in new job-killing taxes. And the Senate goes and does the same thing because they've been a rubber stamp for this president. So I think the tactics are where we've had the biggest disagreement, but frankly, we've actually gotten a lot of common ground in the last year and a half, and we've actually gotten some good things done to forward that conservative agenda.
Congressman, I'm hearing some praise for your leadership. If you guys keep the House majority as we expect in 2015, do you think Speaker Boehner should serve another term as the head of the House?
Look, I mean, there's all kind of speculation about what happens at the end of this Congress. I think anybody that's worried about, what they're going to run for, who's going to be in what position in leadership at the end of this year and into next Congress is missing sight of the fact that we've got a lot of big challenges still to address, and there's a whole election cycle. I mean, again, anybody that starts, trying to figure out what the curtains are going to be measured like in their offices, that's where you into problems where you lose sight of what your main objective is. Our main objective between now and November is to continue to fight for the American people and solve the problems and bring solutions forward to these big problems our country is facing and send them over to the Senate. And if the Senate's not going to address those problems, the voters are going to address that in November. But we can't lose sight of what our primary mission is, and that's got to be working every single day to get our economy back on track, to help create jobs and to solve problems like all of these problems people are facing, losing their health care plans and losing their doctors because of the president's failed policies and laws. I'm
not hearing an explicit endorsement that Boehner should come back as Speaker. Is there a reason?
Well, nobody knows what's going to happen at the end of this year. I'm not going to speculate on who's going to run for what because, if we start focusing on that and worrying about that, frankly, we lose sight of what our mission is and what our job is. Our job is to fight for the American people, to help hardworking taxpayers who are struggling, to solve problems so that people don't lose their health care. That's the things that we've got to be focused on. And frankly, I think you're seeing that not only out of the RSC, but again, a number of these bills have come to the House floor already. And we continue to work with our leadership to bring more of these good conservative solutions to the House floor, send them over to the Senate, and hopefully get the Senate to finally start addressing these problems as well.
Congressman, based though on your conversations and your relationship with Speaker Boehner, Does he still enjoy the job, or is he frustrated?
Look, I'm sure he's got challenges every day he faces. We all have challenges that we face, but none of them are anywhere near as serious as the challenges that so many millions of people across the country are facing in this tough economy. I just did 7 town hall meetings last week throughout southeast Louisiana. You got people that are dealing with real serious problems that are being created primarily by policies and laws coming out of Washington. You know, when you talk to people today, years ago, problems might have been different, might have been global economy problems. Today, the biggest challenges I hear from people and my constituents are about the problems that Washington is creating for the impediments Washington's putting in front of people. That's what we've got to keep focusing on. You know, whatever problems happen in the beltway of, you know, different political factions and all that, it pales in comparison to the problems they're facing.
So, if the Republicans take over the Senate, then let's pretend it's January 2014, what's the first item of business that the Republicans should take up?
I really think all of the different things that we need to do to get our economy moving again. The country is still, if you look at the #1 problem that people talk about, is it's the economy. They want to see an economy that moves and works again. They want to see jobs created again. So many millions of people that just gave up looking for work would love the opportunity to get back into the workforce. And so we've got to go and tackle those problems and bring bills to the Senate, through the Senate, and ultimately get those bills to the president's desk. And I'd like to see him sign a lot of those bills. You know, again, the president loves bragging. He's got a pen and a phone to use that pen to write new law. The president can't write laws. But what the president could do with that pen right now is sign the Keystone Pipeline and create over 25,000 good jobs. He's avoided that. He's ducked that issue. But what would happen if not only the bill we passed out of the House in a very bipartisan way would actually pass the Senate and be sitting on his desk? Then he'd actually have to face that issue and confront that challenge. Would he veto that bill and kill those 25,000 jobs? Or would he maybe sign it? And we ought to give him that opportunity, and I think he'll have that opportunity come January.
Burgess Everett.
I wanted to ask, you were kind of dismissive of the President and Senator Reid's agenda in the Senate, but they laid one out on Wednesday that says we should raise the minimum wage, have paycheck equality for men and women, extend unemployment benefits. They've kind of set up some issues that they believe poll well to kind of keep the Senate. I mean, what do you make of that plan? Do you think there's any common ground there with Republicans, or is this just messaging?
I think it shows that the president's not serious about tackling problems. He's focused on trying to divide the country so he can win elections. And look, if you look at all of the agenda items the president talks about, they're very divisive issues in this country. They're not issues that unite our country. He ran and promised back in 2008 that he'd be a different kind of president that would unite our country, bring us together. In fact, he's probably been one of the most divisive presidents we've ever seen, because every single issue he picks, it seems, is designed towards dividing America down the middle. That's not the kind of America that people want and embrace when they think of the American dream. If you look at the bills that we're talking about bringing forward, both the RSC's health care bill, the RSC's jobs bill, many of these other bills that our leadership's brought to the House floor, they are bills that unite our country, and in fact, you can see that through an actual bipartisan vote on many of these bills that have come before the House. So I think the president, if he really was serious about tackling these problems, he'd be picking issues that unite us, not talking about unemployment benefits. The best unemployment benefit you could have is a good job. And yet the president won't do anything to really get the economy moving again. In fact, his policies have helped create this sluggish, poor, weak economy.
He's now in the second year of his second term. Overall, with everything that we've talked about today, Congressman, how would you size up the president's leadership?
You know, it's hard to really to be able to tell what his leadership plan is. The president has failed in so many areas. Look at his leadership on foreign policy. Our own allies are critical and concerned about America's place in the world. They want us to be a strong nation. And yet you've got a president who still is apologetic for American strength. Are we going to stand behind Israel, our strong ally? Or are we going to support policies that help Iran develop a nuclear weapon? That's leadership, and you don't see it from this president. And so, you know, both on domestic and foreign policy, I think there's just been such a leadership void, and it's one of the reasons our economy is hurting so bad, and millions of Americans have literally given up looking for work because they just don't have that confidence.
Well, let me just follow up on one quick point, and then we'll turn back to Susan Ferricchio. With regard to Ukraine and Russia, what specifically should the president have done that he hasn't done?
Well, first, he should have paid attention to the telltale signs months ago. You know, I'm not sure what their diplomacy has been all about, but, you know, this isn't something that just happened overnight. In fact, you had leaders like Condoleezza Rice warning about this months and years ago. I know one of the debates, you had Mitt Romney talking about Russia as the #1 threat in the world, and Barack Obama dismissed it. In fact, he made a joke about it. And so it shows you, I don't know if he just missed it, if he doesn't get foreign policy, or if he's okay with letting the Soviet Union be rebuilt again. But again, he literally has ignored these problems for so long that it now has created a different escalated type of uncertainty throughout the world.
Going back to the agenda, Congressman, one thing I didn't hear you talk about was the repeal of the health care law. Is that becoming secondary for Republicans? Looking at poll numbers, it seems like the big priority for voters, way ahead of the health care law now, are jobs in the economy. Do Republicans feel it's time to just focus on that and maybe put aside the repeal effort?
No, and in fact, I talked about repeal a little earlier in this interview, and specifically talked about the RSC's health care bill, which starts by repealing the president's health care law, but it replaces it with real reforms. Because I do not think it's good enough to just repeal the health care law. There were problems in our health care system before Obamacare. Those problems are worse today. And those problems are that the cost is too high, and in fact, costs are dramatically higher now after Obamacare, and access has been limited. And access is even worse today. And so our bill focuses on going back to those basic things that put patients back in charge of health care and focus on lowering costs. Things like allowing people to buy insurance across state lines, having more say over the decisions that are made, and getting Washington politicians and bureaucrats like IRS agents out of those decisions. So we're very focused on that. And frankly, it's one of the biggest problems that companies aren't hiring today. When I talk to small businesses right now, their biggest impediment to job growth today, the reason they can't hire today, the #1 reason they cite is the president's health care law. Again, because of those perverse incentives in the law that encourage people to reduce their workforce. What kind of America is it where you literally are encouraging people to lay people off of work and reduce their hours, yet that's what the president's health care law does. So it's one of the big parts of an agenda that gets the economy moving again.
So I wanted to ask you about your colleague Bill Cassidy, who's running for the Senate against Mary Landrieu. BuzzFeed posted this week a tape of him at a fundraiser. He described the uninsured as less sophisticated, less educated, and illiterate. I wondered what you thought of those comments.
I haven't seen any of those comments. One thing I do know is that Bill Cassidy is a medical doctor who actually treats the uninsured. He actually treats people and provides health care. So he understands what the problems in health care are. In fact, if you look at how that race has been shaping up, Senator Landrieu was the deciding vote to pass Obamacare, and that's been a problem for her because people don't like what it's done. I've met so many people in my district who lost good health care they had, and anybody that says they didn't know that was in the bill, everybody knew it was in the bill. We warned that, in fact, when the bill was moving through Congress in 2009. We predicted that people would lose their health care because of those mandates that were so unworkable and the taxes and the law, and it's happening today. It's hurting real people. And so, one of the things I know Congressman Cassidy has worked on very hard is as a health care provider, directly addressing those problems in health care. And I think he'll be able to do that as a senator in a way that we haven't seen, and I think he'll get that opportunity.
We have a few minutes left. Susan Ferricchio.
I know it's early, but any favorites on your part in the 2016 Republican nomination?
I love Ronald Reagan. I was looking for Ronald Reagan in the last two cycles. He's not available, but I want somebody that's got that bold vision that really gets people excited again about our country, and that lays out that conservative agenda that solves problems, and it shows people how conservative solutions can actually work to get our country back again and recreate that American dream. People want optimism. They really thought Barack Obama, a lot of people, were drawn into a lot of Barack Obama's positive campaign message in 2008 when he talked about uniting people. Unfortunately, he failed to deliver. He's let a lot of people down. I think you're going to see a very strong Republican field. I think we're going to probably have one of our strongest fields in years, and I think that's a good thing. We're a party that believes in competition, and I think having a number of different Republicans running, you're already seeing some really good, strong candidates that have that bold conservative vision, and that's what I'm looking for, because I know America's best days are ahead, and I know we've got real problems that aren't being addressed today, but I think having those different candidates out there proposing solutions to America's problems, to get our economy back on track, to balance our budget. That's what people are hungry for, and I'm excited about that opportunity in 2016.
Your current governor in Louisiana, Bobby Jindal, is maybe one of those candidates, I wondered, what is your relationship like with him, and do you think you could be supportive of a run for president from him?
Well, you know, Bobby held the seat that I have today. I actually got elected to Congress in a special election after he was elected governor, and I've known Bobby for a long time. He's incredibly smart. You know, he's one of those people that is being mentioned. He hasn't said that he's running in 2016, but a lot of people are talking about him as they are a number of other people in the field. And again, I think the more good, strong Republican candidates we can have talking about conservative solutions to get our economy moving again and go and inspire people. I think people are hungry to be inspired. They've been let down by this president with all of the promises that he's broken and so many of the opportunities that he had that he failed to fulfill. And so I think you're going to see a real desire and hunger to see a good, strong field. And I think, you know, if Bobby decides to be a part of that field, then that'll be a good thing. And I think there are going to be a lot of other really good people, too, like that, that ultimately get in and inspire this country to get back on track.
And finally, Congressman, are you supporting your colleague, Senator David Vitter, in his bid for the governorship in Louisiana?
You know, well, he hasn't asked for my support, but I like David. I worked with him a lot in the State House. I've worked with him here in Congress, and I think he'd be a good, strong leader in the kind of governor that'll help continue to move our state forward. And I'm glad that he's running. In fact, I know the day he announced, I was real excited that he got into the race because I think he would bring good, strong, bold, conservative leadership as governor of our state. You know, that race is just getting started, but we've got races in November we've got to get through. And again, you know, you don't want to look too far down the field, but I'm glad that he threw his hat in the ring, and I think he'd do a great job as governor.
Will his personal indiscretion in the past be a factor in that campaign, though?
You know, look, he's addressed that before, and obviously he was reelected since that, and you know, and I think people are hungry for bold solutions. They want problems solved, and I think that's been one of the hallmarks of you know what has, I think, gotten people so frustrated about President Obama is that they see a president who's ignoring the serious problems of our country. And they want somebody that's going to go out there and fight for bold solutions to solve problems that are hurting regular folks. I mean, you know, families, middle class people. You know, you see who are losing their Medicare Advantage. People are just frustrated by this radical agenda. They want good solutions that'll get our country moving again. And people that bring those ideas forward, I think, are going to be very successful in these next few election cycles.
Congressman Steve Scalise is a Republican from Louisiana and chair of the Republican Study Committee. Thank you very much for being with us here on C-SPAN.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
Burgess